All right, so for my project, I decided to look into assessment in fourth grade mathematics. Um, the assignment said to choose a subject area of interest to our major and plans in teaching. And I know that I want to teach the upper elementary grades, and I have always personally had a passion for math when learning and teaching. I find everything logically makes sense to me, and it was just one subject area that I always felt like I could excel. So I went out and searched specifically for fourth grade mathematics assessment articles and was able to find some very interesting research. The first article I have is by Martran, Pickrain, and Howard, and its title is An Analysis of the Performance Gap Between American Indian and Anglo Students in the New York State 4th and 8th Grade Mathematics Assessments. Long, wordy title. Basically, we're looking at Native Americans and Anglo white students in New York State and whether there is a gap in math test scores due to the minority situation. They said there's a potential gap. It was pretty well documented, but they were wanting to look more at the student level performance data versus just base test data or grades. They wanted to actually look at the testing. And they took students from 4 schools. It looked at both the 4th grade and the 8th grade because that's the grade levels at which New York does mathematics testing, standardized testing. And they found that in the student performance data, there truly was a gap at both levels. This comes down to both performance and confidence. And they found that the gap actually got wider in the 8th grade. I know I was more interested in 4th grade, but it's fascinating to see that if you don't build that good foundation in the lower grades, as those students get to the higher grades, they're just going to fall that much farther behind. To go a bit more in depth, in the 4th grade, the gap was about 17%. We saw that 75% of Anglo students were proficient in math, getting 71% or better on the test, whereas only about 58% of the Native American students were scoring that proficient level. In the 8th grade, that gap grew to 25%, and I was surprised to see that only 45% of the Anglo students were proficient according to the tests. My thought was that we would see more than that. This was following the No Child Left Behind endeavors, and so seeing only 20% of the Native American students having proficiency came as quite a surprise to me. They ran a confidence interval data analysis as well, and that supported those gaps. And when they went to look at the gaps in subject area specific data, such as modeling, reasoning, etc., they found that the gap was very similar and that the Anglo students were consistently scoring higher than the Native students across all of the subject areas they examined. Moving right along, we have an article by Costco and Singh, and this is actually from earlier this year, and they were looking specifically at what form of mathematics are assessments assessing. They were looking at the NAEP multiplication and division items, and I found this really fascinating because one of the biggest complaints about standardized testing is that it tests test-taking capabilities. And I used to tutor the SAT back when I was in undergrad, and I learned it's all a matter of if you know how to do this, you can take the test and you don't have test anxiety, you can very easily pass with flying colors. So The article investigated the National Assessment of Educational Practices, the NAEP, and it's a test that has been used since 1973 to indicate student progress throughout the United States and is commonly used as a benchmark for what students know and can do in terms of mathematics. It's given every couple of years. It's not like a yearly standardized test. Your learning depends on this. It's more of an analysis type test to see how the teaching is going rather than the learning. They were looking at the validity of the NAEP in math assessment because the types of problems they give were showing that students can do multiplication easily in fourth grade, but they struggle with division, whereas, if you look at their grades in school, they're really not doing that badly necessarily. And one of the biggest points that they were searching for is, does it actually account for mathematical reasoning, or is it just performance-based? So the students were able to do the problems, but they couldn't really explain how they did them, what their thought processes were, what their strategies were. And they found that they were able to perform, but might still lack a depth of understanding. So as a study, they took data from 108 fourth grade students in Midwestern School District in May of 2016. And they had them take the NAEP questions as well as questions from the multiplicative reasoning assessment, the MRA, which is more designed to encourage the reasoning side of multiplication and not fact recall. So, can you read a problem, figure out what you need to do and how to best do it, and get the correct answer? As they compared the performances on these, they found that the same students were showing that they could pass the NAEP problems much more readily than the MRA problems. And they're saying that, in conclusion, the NAEP problems lack validity due to having a lower order of questioning. They just don't require the higher level thinking. They don't demonstrate conceptual understanding, but more so procedural knowledge. And so their recommendation, the writer's recommendation, was that they look into the problems that are coming out in the NAEP as it's changed every year and press more for questions similar to the MRA that require the reasoning, the higher level of thought, and the actual underlying concepts to be understood. And that's going to actually show whether the educational practices are on the right track. While I've got my sources up, I just figure I'll say that in conclusion, I'm still of the opinion that a lot of standardized testing really isn't designed well. It will certainly test, can you do this math problem, but it does not necessarily ask, can you understand what's going on? Can you apply it to real life? Here's a real life situation. Can you take this forward and answer these questions about it? That's what we really need to focus on moving forward. And if we can get test designers, test writers who can understand that and actually be able to write to assess that, we'll truly be able to assess learning and not just assess test-taking capabilities. And that's my thoughts. Have a great day.